the mighty, powerful name of Jesus. Let's worship him together, church.
You are Welcome to Canvas Online. We're so excited you chose to join us today. We want you to feel at home here, so if you're watching for the first time or you're wanting to get more connected at Canvas and receive updates from us, as well as the ability to let us know when we can pray for you, text the word welcome to the number on your screen and fill out your online Connect card. July 12th is going to be our first Sunday with an open building. Now that we can meet at 50% capacity, we're so excited to invite you back with no pre-registration required. And we're also, most of all, excited to welcome back kids of all ages to Canvas. Canvas Kids is a moving target a little bit, and as we navigate the best way to keep all of our favorite people safe, we'll continue to release details as to what classrooms will be open as we get closer to that July 12th date. We really need you as we re-enter the Canvas building. Many of our most vulnerable members of Canvas are not able to serve in their serve positions at this time. So we have needs in all of our Sunday teams and are asking you to be a part of reaching our community for Jesus. Please consider browsing our teams and signing up for one by clicking on the serve icon on our website. For continuing updates, weekly inspiration, and fun content, be sure to watch our Facebook and Instagram accounts. Do you have kids who miss coming to church? Be sure to check out our complete kids services put together by our amazing Canvas Kids team. They are so much fun. My kids love them. You can find them right on our main Canvas Facebook page, or you can join our Canvas Kids Facebook page at any time. We hope that you enjoyed today's message.
Hey, Canvas Church, Pastor Jeff here, and I'm honored to be in this company of gentlemen, and we're here today to talk about, really to start the conversation. We're calling this reconciliation conversations. And part of this is in light of what happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd, but I truly believe part of this is that revealed some unhealth in our country that's been going on for years and years and years. And oftentimes we look at systems to change and governments to change and things like that, when ultimately what needs to change first and foremost is our own human hearts. And so this is a conversation with some amazing individuals who've done some incredible things in their lives that I can't wait to share with you as we are here today. And also, I just want you to know, I have names down here, but I have nothing. I don't have an agenda. I don't have notes yet. Oftentimes when I was in college, I would bring my notebook empty and I would leave filled with notes because I was there to learn. And this for me and this for us, I believe in this season, is really a season to listen and to learn. And oftentimes you can't learn if you're busy talking. And so I truly believe this is an opportunity for us to listen and to learn what we've been missing. What maybe for years and years and years we've taken for granted and not realized really what's happening around us. And several weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, George Floyd was murdered in downtown Minneapolis, and we saw that. But more than us, the entire world saw that. And I just think that for us, we can't be silent any longer. We can't sit in wonder. We can't sit and think it's someone else's problem without us stepping up, stepping in and saying, hey, I need to own my part of this. I need to be a part of the positive change. And honestly, that starts with a conversation. Reconciliation starts with a conversation. And that's why we're here today. And I just want to introduce you to some incredible individuals that I'm just getting to know. That I've had a chance to work with a little bit, but I'm looking forward to working with even more. We have Pastor Kelvin from Fountain of Life Church here in Minneapolis. We have Mark Graves, who is the area director of the Boys and Girls Club of Phelps neighborhood.
South Minneapolis.
South Minneapolis. Thank you, Mark. That's awesome. That's good. I'm learning. It's awesome. This is Pastor Jim. He is the lead pastor here at Fountain of Life. This is Peyton, or Pastor Peyton. He's the youth pastor here at Fountain of Life. And so we're just going to have a conversation, and we're just going to ask some questions. I'm going to ask some questions, and we've talked a little bit about this already, and I just want this to be free-flowing. There might be moments where you hear something that might expose some ignorance that you have, that I have. It might expose some racism that might be deep in our heart that we might not even realize yet. And my hope for you is in this moment that we almost pray the prayer that David prayed in Psalm 139. Search me and know my heart, God. Point out anything in me that offends you, and help me to walk on your path everlasting. That's my hope in this conversation, because I truly believe that maybe for the first time in our history of my life, 43 years, that we can affect change. And that's the hope that I have in this moment. And so I'm just going to open up the conversation. I remember, I mentioned this already to the gentleman, but I remember when I was in college, I never asked questions. I was always concerned that in the moment that I raised my hand, what would happen is that I would reveal my ignorance to my entire class. So I valued their perception of my intelligence more than my actual intelligence. And really what that was, it wasn't intelligence, it was ignorance. And since then, I've gotten to the point where I don't care if people think I'm ignorant or intelligent. I would rather have the value of the information and the knowledge than be ignorant. And so even if I look ignorant for a moment, but I capture the information and that changes my perspective, that's really what I would love to be a part of. And that's really kind of how I live my life. And so in this moment, I'm probably going to say things that might not be the smartest things. And I apologize in advance. And so let me start with this question. So we were talking a little bit and mentioning just like, wow, George Floyd, that created a lot of tension, or that maybe blew up and all over the world. But we had just mentioned, like, now that wasn't the catalyst of what happened. That was actually just, it just exposed what was already happening. And so I'd love your input. I'd love your thought process. I'd love, we have ages, generations, races here. I'd love all of your thought processes in that. So jump in, share your thoughts.
I think I would kind of agree with that statement you made. It was kind of or maybe I'd say it was the fire that lit the fuse. Sure. Because what that exposed, or what that focused attention on, is a problem that has plagued America for generations. Policemen brutalizing black men, black women, people of color is not anything new. But that camera exposed it. And it exposed it in a way that was very graphic, in a way that was undeniable. You may not remember, but in the 60s, there was a lot of footage of people being brutalized by policemen in Birmingham when Martin Luther King marched. And the world saw that problem, and that helped turn attention to that problem, and it helped make changes. But there are a lot of issues that still persisted, especially in the area of law enforcement. Now, there are issues in all of society, but law enforcement in particular has been a point of real contention and a point of real pain for people of color, because, what you saw happen with Mr. Floyd, it was a murder. And it's typical, and it didn't stop. And this is the thing that I knew, as bad as that was, as egregious as that was, it wasn't going to stop. And since that time, Rayshard Brooks is another black man that was killed in Atlanta. And there have been others since that time. So it was a fuse that drew attention, and things exploded across not just this country, not just the United States, but across the globe. And so sad, I'm so sorry that someone had to die to bring attention to this issue. But thank God it appears that his death will not be in vain. But it's an ongoing problem, and many of us, who have seen it before, seen it over the generations, knew that, as bad as it was, as egregious as it was, that we weren't there yet. That this was the thing that might bring us there, but we're not there yet.
What I take from it, and I really hope people truly understand, as you just stated, George Floyd, even though the world has seen what happened, and that's where a lot of the attention is right now, George Floyd is a small little clog, small piece of the systematic issues and problems that has faced America. And I think the reason that we're seeing some of the response that we have seen in America and around the world is because it's such an eye-opener that people have to now really look at themselves, look at how they have been thinking. Quick story, I had a friend when this happened, about a day after, and she contacted me and she just said, "I'm so sorry. All of these years that I was hearing some of these stories, I didn't believe it. I really thought that a lot of times when African Americans, black people, male, female, was getting arrested and different things was happening to them, I thought they really deserved it." And what she told me was, seeing that video has forced me to look at things a little bit differently, to give more of the benefit of the doubt instead of already kind of having it in my head that it was deserved. So if nothing else, that video helped open eyes, but I really want people to understand, as much as that video hurt everybody, the problem is so much bigger than one individual. George Floyd right now happens to be the face, but the gentleman in Atlanta, I mean, there's so many different faces. You go all the way back to the Trayvon Martins, there's so many, I call them the speed bumps. To get to George Floyd, there's been so many different speed bumps. And I just really hope people truly understand that as much as we want to focus on this one, this problem is generational. And there's something that people have to really address, something in their heart and in their mind of what they have been taught growing up, what they have taught their children, their grandparents, so on and so on. That's what needs to be addressed.
Because, I tell my friends this all the time, like, what extent do black people have to die for people's eyes to be open? What made George Floyd, everybody's seen the process of what happens when you choke somebody to death.
Sure.
It's a full 10-minute video. It's not just a clip. And it's just, and the reason why it brings so much attention in Minnesota, and I give this analogy, when there's a car crash down the block from where you stay at, you're gonna go outside, you're gonna look, and it's like, okay, cool. When there's a car crash that crashed into the house 3 houses from you, you're gonna pay a little bit more attention because it's close to home.
Sure.
Now, when a car crash in your house, it's a different feeling.
Right.
This stuff been going on all over America.
Yeah.
It just so happened to happen in Minneapolis.
Absolutely.
Like, how would it happen in Minnesota, one of the nicest states, people may say. And it's like, no, we experienced this stuff, and it's sad that a death had to happen for eyes to be open. But it's like, what extent do black people have to die at for everybody to realize, there's different experiences, different narratives living in America when it comes to different ethnic groups.
I think you just touched on something, like in Minnesota, like we're Minnesota nice. right? Like we can be passive aggressive rather than actually facing up to the real issue. You know, so we'll talk around things, you know, but we won't actually like, you know, talk, like look right in each other's eyes and be like, hey, help me understand what I'm missing here.
Yeah.
So even in this moment, you said that, you know, like this is what we've been experiencing. This is what we've been experiencing. Like, you know, how many individuals, how many African American, how many Black individuals will have to die before people open their eyes? I think part of the process is help us even understanding like what are some of the things. I think your analogy about the neighborhood in the car, you're exactly right. You know, you might hear the sirens like, oh, something's going on, okay? Or it's like, oh, it's across the street, or oh, it's my house. It's a different analogy. It's a different proximity because it is so close. So even some of the things when you say that, you know, this is, even help maybe understand, like for those individuals, you know, for myself, like we have different color skin and we've lived different lives and we see the world differently, you know, or at least that's what it seems like, you know, culture has spoken to us or the media has told us, or even the reality of our experience in life. Like, what are some of the things that we're like, this is a common theme for me? You know, I know, Mark, you mentioned like even in your neighborhood, what's happening right now or where you're living, just the constant gunshots.
Well, the aftermath, and it's a continued aftermath, but the aftermath of what happened with George Floyd, now I live 3 blocks from the incident, one direction, work 1 block from the incident, the other direction. And not only this neighborhood, but people have been traumatized. They don't know how to deal with this trauma. Myself, I'm working 10 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yes.
So I don't have to think.
Yeah.
But there's other individuals, they have no idea how to deal with this whole trauma, not just George Floyd. The systematic trauma from economics, the academic, which in their mind, they might not even be thinking about.
Sure.
So when I was making a comment, what's happening now in the neighborhood, there's gunshots throughout the night. All night, you're hearing cars just screeching down the block. Right now in South Minneapolis, we are dealing with, let me just call it what it is, some lawlessness. Right now, the Minneapolis Police Department, I think, personally, is saying this is what you guys wanted. Now you're gonna get an idea of what it's like not to have police presence. This is not what people was asking for. What we were asking for is to be treated like anybody else. If it's a routine traffic stop, we want to be treated the same way as if anybody else of any other color would be treated in a routine traffic stop. Not to where we're already have an idea of what they're going to be facing when they walk up to that car door. With the gun, with their hand on the gun. It's a whole different thought. I just mentioned to Pastor Jim like an example. If I call the police and ask them, can you come and help me get my cat out of the tree? I would like the same response if someone from the suburbs had called with that same request, and it's not the same when they are in the heart of the city compared to other places. So we're not asking, and I'm going into another tent, we're not asking to abolish the police or different things like that. We want fair treatment. If you think about it, and I know I'm getting a little long-winded, if you think about it, of all the different groups that might have interaction with the police, the Minneapolis Police Department, when they have interactions with every group, including African Americans, there might be some berating that goes on. Not all the time, and I'm not painting a picture that every Minneapolis police officer is this horrible person. No, I know police officers. But there might be some berating. There might even be a little bit of roughing up, depending on what the situation. The difference is these other groups are not dying in police custody. There is an issue of when they deal with a black man compared to when they're dealing with other groups. The Native American community gets terrorized by Minneapolis Police Department. For some reason, even that group is not dying in their presence. There's something else going on here where black men and black women are actually dying in their presence compared to some of the other groups that might complain that, oh, I got talked to badly, I even got kind of roughed up, they treated me differently, but they're not dying.
And that's because it's the perspective. You know, it's like what perspective of black people did they grow up with? Sure. You know, and it runs deep. It runs in our education system. It runs sometimes in our churches. It runs in our programs. It runs in our legal system. You know, this been happening in history where they use criminalizing words towards black people. For example, when I say thug, what's one of the first people you think of? Typically,
I think of a rapper.
You think of a rapper.
Of a rapper.
Okay, when it comes to a rapper, exactly. So it's like when you think of gangsters, when you think of killers, like these negative terms is often tagged with the black community. So you have a police officer who's not from that community, who grew up with that perspective, and now they about to serve in that community, then it's like, okay, these are animals. Best way to tame an animal is to use brutal force. So it's just that, it's that perspective. You know, and now the question is, how can we change that perspective? You know, how can we be a bridge builder to tell them, like, no, we are human too. And that's all that we, you know, Mark was saying, that's all we asking for. You know, we are humans too, we're not animals. You know, we like high fives, we love barbecues and all that stuff, just like everybody else does. But it's that people have to realize, what perspective do you have? Another point I want to say is when somebody's telling their experience, when somebody telling that narrative, you shouldn't take offense to it. You know, you can't take offense to somebody's story. It's their story. You know, if you did or have or still doing taking offense to somebody's story, you got to ask yourself why. Why am I offended? It's this person's experience. What perspective or what pedestal do I put people on? You know, I have conversations with a lot of my white friends, and like one of them, she said, like, we grew up putting cops on a pedestal. Like, we invited cops to our birthdays and stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, I wish we had that, you know? And at the Boys and Girls Club, we tried to build that, you know, and it went great, you know?
Got a great relationship with a lot of Minneapolis police officers.
But we got to change that perspective. We have to change that perspective. So, because everybody in uniform is humans too. You know, they trying to make it home to their family. They trying to make it home, you know, safe and sound. So it's the lack of education in the police system. And I've been handcuffed, unfortunately, and I can tell that story later. But in that opportunity, I had a conversation with a cop, and I just asked him, like, yo, what's going on? You know what I mean? This happens too much. You know, there's this fear between the black community and cops, you know, and y'all supposed to serve and protect us. You know, we can't serve and protect ourselves, you know, as we hear in the aftermath of what's going on. So what's going on? And he just broke it down to me, like, literally, one is just the low numbers of cops in low income areas. So the moment when somebody graduates from the university, they barely go through the police academy school because low numbers. So they just throw them in the streets. So that's somebody who already have a perspective of that community being thrown in that community with that same perspective, you know? And we don't know how long they had that perspective for, you know? So it's just a lack of education, you know? So when we talk about like defunding the police, there are extremists that was like, we want community policing. No, we don't. I tried that, you know what I mean? I tried to stop some looters, I almost got tased. So it's like, no.
Enough of that.
No, but it's like, where can we put money towards that would help not only the police system, but also the community that really needs it, you know? Because we have to change the perspectives. We have to change the narratives too, So, yeah.
No, that's so good. I think oftentimes, you talk about defunding the police and what that looks like. That's a fruit issue, not a root issue. Where how do we deal with symptoms? It's like, hey, you got a cold, so here's some Kleenex. Well, it's not about that. It's about you getting proper rest and boosting your immunity system. It's about attacking. How do I boost the root of the system, not just the fruit of the system, right? So even in this process, I think this is one of those conversations that gets to the root of things. You mentioned it, Mark. I mentioned it. It's a heart issue. It's a heart issue.
Yes.
And I think, okay, so in this, there's a training component, which you talked about. There's an environmental component, which, oftentimes I didn't grow up in an inner city setting. I grew up in a town of 1,000 people, and we had zero diversity. We actually had a foreign exchange student from Spain, and we thought he was amazing, right? It was like he was like a show pony because he wasn't like us. And so then I graduate from there, high school, and then I moved to North Central University, Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm on the phone with my mom, talking to my mom, and all of a sudden I hear this pew pew, I hear gunfire, and my mom's like, "What's that?" And then there's a siren, and I'm like, "What are you talking about, Mom?" I hadn't even thought about it, I didn't even think about it. But that's a totally different context of being raised, and even my mom, be careful, because in her mind, she's thinking what she grew up with or what she saw, and I'm like, Mom, I feel safe. I'm good. I don't feel, and it's interesting the different contexts and the different understanding. And so, Pastor Jim,
yeah,
I'd love to hear some insight from you.
Well, when this went down, I think as I was praying and looking, God, what do you say about this? And there were some scripture passages that came to mind, and Amos is a good. I know Martin Luther King used some of those, but in Proverbs 29:7, here's a different one. It says, "The righteous care about justice for the poor, but the wicked have no such concern." Well, then, the thought kind of came to mind, as this passage tells us, it's a test of our godly character to care and act for the poor who are experiencing an injustice. A specific challenge today for us here in the United States. We've been, as this verse says, we've been wicked to people of color, especially the African American brothers and sisters that we're living alongside. And when I saw that incident, I saw so many different levels of injustice. First, you have the white policeman kneeling on George Floyd's neck, and until the air was just suffocated out of him, and I just kind of sensed that I hurt really for all the African American people that I knew, because I knew they were suffocating at that moment. When they watched that video, I hurt for them. And I think one of the things, if you're a white person in America and you don't feel that way, you don't know African American people. And that's the first thing you need to do, is you need to come alongside, just do life with some African American people if it's possible. I came on the scene here probably in Minneapolis. I was raised on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, didn't have any people of color that I interacted with, but I wasn't necessarily taught one way or the other. My family made us sit down and watch Roots, and I got a little glimpse of, wow, that's some of our history. And but I got here, and then my youth group was probably 50% African American, then other nationalities, maybe 20% white. I learned a lot from those kids. I mean, those kids would say things, but the reality, that was just when, Brian Stevenson was maybe just passing his bar exam, and he's an African-American lawyer his goal was to try to help get cases that were African-Americans were maybe put on death row in framed or just without proper evidence. And up to this day, I think they've helped over 140 cases, but I would encourage everybody here to go watch maybe Just Mercy, and that's a story about his life, and he does Equal Justice, EJI, Equal Justice Initiative. Especially as white people that aren't if you don't know African American people that you're doing life with, that you can feel their pain when stuff like this happens, at least start looking, watch some of these. There's a lot of different movies. That's definitely a good one. Selma, there's a lot of you just Google it, top 10 to get educated about the African American community, and that would help you catch a better understanding of how did we get to where we're at right now, and why are we still kind of here, and are we still here? And then it keeps going on. And I know a lot of people have different lens that they look through when they look at this. And I can't say how many times since this happened when people tried to change the narrative, as I'm talking about white people, where they've tried to change the narrative. Well, George Floyd was a criminal. Well, guess what? Now that cop's a bigger criminal because he's a murderer. And not all cops are bad. I have a lot of friends that are policemen, African American, whatnot, family members. We need to come together in a way that God intended, as a mosaic that He intended us to be, but it begins in our heart, because we do talk about it being a skin issue, but it's more of a sin issue that we need to address. And all of us need to really ask that question. Do I look at someone, do I prejudge what I think about them? This Brian Stevenson, this lawyer, he jumps in a pool. His mom thinks it's great, go take him to a pool or family. And all of a sudden, everybody's jumping out, and he's thinking, oh, something must be in the water. So he quick jumps out. Then he realized they jumped out because he jumped in. Wow. Because it was all white people. Yeah. And that's the experience that a lot of African-American people have. As soon as they move around, I have people tell me, oh, man, my neighborhood, black people moved in, whatever. And, these are things that they've had to live with. But we've created that narrative, really, and we need to repent of it, and we also need to try to help be changers in this. 100%. So I'm sorry I took a little extra time there, but it's a little bit about where my heart is at, and I want to be a changer. I've been here, like I said, 30 years, and our congregation is diverse, but that, I believe, is what heaven's going to be like. But I can't say I know how they feel, but we're all called to be there for brothers and sisters in Christ.
If I could just jump in on something real quick. I had a conversation last week with a friend of mine, and she was asking just certain questions. And it was, I'm a white person, and I just really want to know more. Yeah. First of all, those are hard questions for people of color to even answer, because a lot of the things that, like the questions, it's like we take for granted. Really, you need to know that? Yeah. But the conversations kept moving, and what she told me was, I know there's so many things that's wrong, but there's just something that bothers me when these conversations come up. And I asked her, what was that? When people start talking about white privilege, she said, that word just kind of bothers me, even though I know in reality there has been that. Yeah. And I had to listen for a while, because I just didn't want to just jump out there. And I tried to explain to her, part of what you just said, that you have a hard time with the phrase or the wording of white privilege, is part of white privilege. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The fact that that there's a problem, that it's been totally uneven, rather which lens you're looking out of, but you can't accept the fact that there has been privilege. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right there, and not to point the finger or just totally judge, because that person has a good heart. Yeah. Right there, something isn't registering. Mm-hmm. There's a problem. That you admitted yourself that you have been privileged, but the word white privilege bothered her. Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to get to is, you have to get over that. There's been many words that have affected and bothered
more than words.
Black people for centuries. Yeah. If you really want to try to get to the root of the problem, your mind has to be opened up enough to understand where some of the problems is. And part of the problems is privilege. Mm-hmm. Privilege from day one. Yeah. From day one, we wasn't seen the same as you. from day one, the first Constitution, the African was deemed as only 2/3 human.
Right.
So there was privilege set there from day one. The obvious that if anybody who's enslaved by someone else, you have a lot of privilege.
Sure.
But mentally, throughout the years from those generations, it has gotten lost that, why are you even complaining? What are you talking about? The schools aren't fair. People could go to any school they want to.
Yeah.
Even though, if you know American history, it was against the law to teach a black person to read or write.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's kind of like now we're thrown on a racetrack and people like, run.
Yeah.
Why aren't you running as fast as everybody else? Yeah. But you have to go back to the systematic issues that made this race unfair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you're not willing to even look at it and see that there's some unfairness in the race, you have missed the boat.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to go back to a lot of the root of things, and you have to really understand that it's been unfair, that there has been privileges that we've never, ever had, and that has been what has been stemming this racism from the 1600s.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that was a hard conversation to have, because every time I even brought up some of that, it was the pushback, oh, it doesn't have to be phrased like, yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
You have to hear this. You have to hear my pain, that I feel that you've been overly privileged to even get to the conversation. Way before you get to a George Floyd, way before you get to the police brutality, America has been based on racism. America has been based on privilege. Our forefathers were all slave owners. So right there, that set everything in motion of how to not care that I was enslaved.
Yeah.
Our greatest leaders enslaved people. So how can people coming up after that feel this same trauma, this same this same unfairness that we have felt because their leaders said it was okay. And then when you hear that, well, everyone had slaves. Duh, that's the problem.
Right.
That's the problem, and I really think people really need to start looking at the deeper. America was based on unfairness.
Yeah.
But our greatest leaders led the way, so then the sensitivity part isn't the same. What are you talking about? George Washington, great.
Yeah, I like to give this analogy. You in charge of a playground, you found this playground, whatever, and it's your playground. So then, you have your closest friends over, and you see, let's say most of them is black, you have your black friends over, and it's like, all right, cool, now just meet my friends. Now you have other ethnicities coming over, you say, okay, well, you people, you can't play on the slide, you can't touch this, you can't touch that. You people, you can't even touch the sand. You have to watch from afar.
Yeah.
You can play around the playground, but you can't be on the playground. So like at that moment, you're creating a system, right?
Yeah.
That whoever is there, they know the system because it's your playground. Now, because I'm in charge of that playground, I create a system. Now, when my little brother comes along, don't even know what's going on,
Right.
but he just sees he's playing along. So now he's starting treating people unfairly because it's that system.
Yeah.
So when we talk about privilege, it's the same thing where it's a systematic issue.
Yeah.
Where when the moment we're born, it's like we're just a part of the game because we normalize everything. We normalize everything, It's normal that we treat black people like this. It's normal that black people act like this because that's what the leaders said, you know what I mean? That's what the leaders call us, you know? And it's like, if nobody don't step up and say, okay, this is wrong, why am I treating them like this? And they're human just like I am, it will continue, the system will continue to keep going, you know? But it takes, you have to put yourself you have to just ask yourself that question. Like, why are people crying out for help? Yeah. Why is people crying out for help? And what we often do is when the black community, when we cry out for help, like this stuff is happening to us, there's people who will take offense to that. No. And that's due comparison. Well, this don't happen to me, so why you think it happened to you? And it's like, we're different people.
Sure.
Also, it's just, you know, that privilege. It's like, I don't see it. Yeah. And it's like, of course you don't see it, right, you know? Right. So something has to happen, you know what I mean? And that's the reason why it's a systematic issue, you know? And then becomes a personal issue because we just play along.
Well, and you know, kind of, we're saying, you know, pretty much the same thing. And it's really hard to explain it because, like I said before, some of the things that people might want an explanation and like kind of what we're doing now, it gets really frustrating because it's like, wow, why haven't you seen that? But if you really think about it, it's so easy when you're living your daily life, you're taking care of your children, you're making sure. It's hard to see that. And I truly understand that. But, you know, like Pastor Jim was saying, and like you were saying also, this is when you have to try to reach out and get some other knowledge.
Yeah.
If you don't have people in your community or whatever, there's other ways that you could possibly try to get that knowledge. And one of the things I find frustrating as a black man in America, where do you get that knowledge? Coming up in school, I work with the kids, and we'll have the 1 month Black History Month. Yeah. And I don't know if I told you this before, Jim. I was asking one of the kids just some general questions, and I asked him, did he know who George Washington Carver was? He said, oh yeah, that was the first president of the United States. I mention that because, you know, when I heard him say it, you know, I had to chuckle, first of all, but then it really started touching me of the little bit that not just African American kids or kids of color, people, young people in general, what is being taught in schools, what is being taught in schools in the history books. Black people didn't exist until we came to America as slaves. But if you think about it, if you look at what is being taught to young people, there's no history in American history books about anything of my ancestors other than we were brought here as slaves. Africa's been here for forever. But it's being groomed. That's all.
That's where we came from.
That's all that was, and it's been groomed in our head. That there was nothing else of importance. So if it's been groomed in my head and other people that look like me, just think of the white population that when they briefly go through that, that's all they know of black people. Oh, they were only slaves. Nothing about the rich history of Africa. The other thing about what kids are being taught, instead of some of the real things that has happened in America, and I'm just going to use it as an example, I was taught about Helen Keller and not about some of the evil things that was happening from 1600, 1619, when the first Africans arrived here, up until then. So what I'm getting to is, We have been programmed, and when I say we, I'm not just talking about one race. We have been programmed to think a certain way about certain people. The forefathers, the George Washingtons, and the people in that era, they were totally lifted up, and their beliefs of what they were doing has created where we're at now. And not enough, you have to search for that knowledge because it's not there. It's not going to be put in front of you. I was taught more about Helen Keller teaching the blind instead of what was really happening with America. And somehow you have to want to know the truth and you got to explore.
Hey, I'm so glad that you joined us this morning for our first part of Reconciliation Conversations. It was a powerful morning. I want to encourage you, take some time to think through what was said, even pray through what was said. Sometimes when we're in a learning process, processing the information can be hard to do. And so I encourage you, take some time this week to think through it, pray through it, even share it with some friends. Be sure to join us next week as we have part 2 of Reconciliation Conversations. Thank you for joining us.
When our hopes are hit by heartbreak, let your presence meet us there. When the pain seems overwhelming, we hold on to you.
When the streets are torn by chaos, we will be your hands and feet. When the darkness brings division, may we be your light. We know our world needs Jesus. We know our world needs freedom. So give us eyes to see the hurting and the broken, and let our lives align with every word you say. When the nations ache from violence, we will be your blessed peace. When the headlines scream injustice, may we shout your name. 'Cause we know our world needs Jesus, and we know our world needs freedom. So give us eyes to see the hurting and the broken, and let our lives align with every word you say.
Let every heart turn to Jesus. Let every voice sing of your great name. Let all the earth know your freedom. We believe for more. And let every heart turn to Jesus. Let every voice sing of your great name. Let all the earth know your freedom. And we believe for more. We believe for more. 'Cause we know our world needs Jesus. And we know
I know this heart needs healing. So from my knees I lift my prayer to you, my Savior. For my life and for the world, you're the answer, Jesus.
Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen.
Well, hey, thank you for joining us this week at Canvas Church Online. It truly is our honor that you would take your time to be a part of what we're doing here. And I truly hope that you feel excited, that you feel encouraged, you feel ready to take on your week. And also, you know what, if this blessed you in any form or fashion, I encourage you, share this message with your friends. Engage with us this week on one of our online platforms, whether that's Facebook or whether that's Instagram. Also, if you are blessed at all today, I want to encourage you to partner with us to see even more lives changed in our community, in this country, and around the world. And the way that you do that is by giving financially. Go to canvaschurchmn.online.church. You can follow the prompts, find the best way to give for you, whether that's online, whether that's sending in a donation through your bank account, or whether that's text to give. I encourage you, find the best option for you and support what we're doing here in blessing those in this community, this country, and around the globe. We're so grateful for you. I pray that you have an incredible, incredible week. Come on back next week. We'll be here same time, same place, Canvas Church Online. Have a great